Hello. Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Center for Brooklyn History. My name is Marcia Eli, and it's my honor to greet you tonight on behalf of the Brooklyn Public Library, the library's Arts and Culture team, BPL Presents, and all of my colleagues here at the Center for Brooklyn History. Every June since 2001, World Refugee Day recognizes those who have been forced to flee their countries due to conflict and persecution and seek sanctuary and better lives in a new home across the globe. Tonight we spotlight refugees from one troubled country, Venezuela, and zoom in on individuals whose stories are both unique and yet relay the hardships of so many in Venezuela. We are joined by three activists, experts, many things who you will meet and hear about shortly. But before I welcome our panelists, I'd like to share just a little bit about this place where we are. The Center for Brooklyn History, which was formerly the Brooklyn Historical Society, became a part of the Brooklyn Public Library in 2020. We are a research library and community hub. Since reopening this building just last September, on any given day, you will find scholars, students, and members of the general public upstairs in the magnificent Othmer Library, surrounded by folders and boxes of primary materials pulled from the most comprehensive collection of Brooklyn-related materials in the world. They are researching topics that run the gamut, from Brooklyn's abolitionist history to personal family genealogies, and they're always guided by our team of expert librarians and archivists. Down here, people gather on the couches and around the tables that typically fill this space. Entry is free for everyone and anyone, and on evenings like tonight, the public attends free weekly programs that bring leading historians, experts, and thinkers to Brooklyn. These programs often amplify topics that touch us all, and that is the case tonight. So now it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, Eric Rosso, who will in turn introduce the panel. Eric is a community advocate, a political activist, and founder of the SESI Foundation, where he promotes social integration through culture, educational, and social programs. He holds a master's in public administration and development practice from Columbia University, where he was the first Venezuelan recipient of the Columbia Global Scholarship for Displaced Students in 2020. For 7 years, he has been pivotal in organizing the Venezuelan diaspora in New York, supporting the integration of refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants. Eric will be leading tonight's conversation with Emmy-nominated award-winning journalist and documentary filmmaker Carlos Beltran, and David Smolansky, who is visiting fellow at Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced International Studies, and you'll hear more about both of them from Eric. So now, please help me welcome Eric, David, and Carlos to the stage. Thank you.
Special thanks to Marcia and the Center for Brooklyn History for hosting us tonight. It's not only important for us and for every community that have the opportunity to portray their stories in such an important and historic place as this, and also to represent and educate our recipient communities, in this case, New York, of what's happening in the countries of origin of these communities. So tonight, we'll have a compelling conversation about the situation and the politics and the crisis that have put millions of Venezuelans displaced across the region and crossing, including here to the US. Some of you may know that Venezuela was beacon of prosperity. Whatsoever, we have nowadays a country that is, and I'm going to read, for I don't get to miss the facts. Venezuela now is the heart of the largest displacement crisis in the world, but also the less funded response. Over 7 million of Venezuelans have left their country, and tonight we aim to delve into the why behind every journey, exploring the deep impacts of political turmoil and instability back in Venezuela. Today, we have the opportunity to present and have with us, we're honored, two distinguished speakers, Carlos Beltran, an Emmy-nominated journalist and documentary filmmaker whose project It Suddenly Occurred to Me uses an art to echo the real-life experience of Venezuelans. Joining him, we have David Smolansky, which is a visiting fellow at St. Johns Hopkins University and a senior advisor on foreign policy. David, who has been a leading voice addressing the Venezuelan migration crisis, currently serves as the deputy director of Maria Corina Machado campaign in Washington, D.C. against the regime of Nicolás Maduro. Let's dive into the conversation of tonight. Welcome,
Thank you.
David and Carlos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both, and thank you again, Marcia and the Center for Brooklyn History for having us. One question, David, to start the conversation and to set the stage for the audience that have no necessarily clues on what's happening right now in Venezuela. Could you provide us with an overview of the current political climate in the country and what would be the implications of the upcoming presidential elections in July the 28th?
Sure, Eric. Well, thank you so much, Eric. Carlos, it's a real honor and pleasure to be here, and Marcia and the Center for Brooklyn History. As I said, well, it's an honor to be here, and also I'd like to see audience that is from this receiving community and also from the Venezuelan diaspora. This is a question that could take ages to answer, right? Because there's so much information. But I would like to put in a nutshell, I would like to put Venezuela in context for some people that might not be aware of what is going on. Well, first of all, we've been under an authoritarian regime that has become a brutal dictatorship since 1999. It's been 25 years. Venezuela used to be one of the most prosperous democracies and economies, not only in the region, but worldwide during the second half of the 20th century. And unfortunately, all of those efforts during more than 4 decades were lost since 1999. The main lesson, especially for young generations in Venezuela, is that democracy was used to destroy democracy, because all of this that has happened in Venezuela was done through democratic tools, because it started with free and fair elections. Today, we have a country that, as Eric explained, 8 million people have fled Venezuela. It is the largest migration and refugee crisis worldwide, surpassing Syria, that has been under a civil conflict for more than a decade, or Ukraine, that has been invaded by Russia during the last 2 years. Also, Venezuela, not many people know this, since 1999, more than 400,000 people have been killed because of crime. That makes Venezuela, since the beginning of this century, one of the most dangerous countries to live, and Caracas has been, during the last decade, the most violent capital in the world. Third, during the last decade, more than 16,000 Venezuelans, 16,000 Venezuelans have been illegally detained, which is way more than the Southern Cone dictatorships that Chavez and Maduro always, Chavez used to criticize and Maduro criticized. So 16,000 Venezuelans, just to think, because we have thought differently from the regime, because we have gone peacefully to the streets to protest, have been illegally detained. And not only illegally detained, people in those jails have been tortured psychologically and physically. In Venezuela now, there is the biggest torture center in Latin America and the Caribbean, and its name is El Helicoide, where right now hundreds of people are illegally detained. And the economy of Venezuela during the last decade has been reduced more than 70%, which is only compared with countries that have been devastated by wars. There's no other comparison, not mentioning also that we have had a hyperinflation that has gotten even to 1 year to 10 million percent of hyperinflation. Literally, you in the morning went to buy, I don't know, eggs, and it was $1, and then you go back in the afternoon, and the eggs were already $2 or $3. So that's what we are facing in this moment. Having the largest oil reserve in the world, our economy is a bit bigger than the Trinidad and Tobago economy. So I wanted to put this in a global context because, and I'm sorry I didn't mention this. According to the World Food Program of the United Nations, 9.3 million people cannot eat 3 times a day. This is the largest population suffering from food insecurity in the Western Hemisphere and the 4th largest in the world, only compared with countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Yemen, or Afghanistan. So it's a country that has been devastated. And the main lesson here is has been man-made. We have not had a natural disaster. We have not had a civil war or at least a conventional war. And yet, well, those are the facts. And all of what I have said is not something that I have made up. You can find it online. So in this context, I'm sorry if I'm taking a bit longer, but I wanted to put Venezuela.
You're a politician.
No. Well, we have that bad fame, but I don't know if those politicians maybe those give those facts that I gave. But anyway, to put that in a context as an introduction, we're having elections this year, and against every odd, we are 34 days ahead or having a presidential elections. That makes it could. Everyone is skeptic on what can happen, but the country 15 months ago were completely hopeless. People didn't believe that a change could happen. Last year was the year that most Venezuelans came to the U.S. through the Darien Gap. 350,000 Venezuelans went through the Darien Gap only last year. And we have made a strong effort internally to have the opposition united, to have the people with hope. We were able to organize a primary that 2.6 million people went to vote despite the social control and the repression apparatus. The leader of the primary that was elected, her name is Maria Corina Machado, which I have the honor to work with her on her international affairs team. And of course, because it's a dictatorship, she was bound to run for president. But what no one saw coming is that she was very smart to have every political actor agree on a new candidate, which his name is Edmundo González Urrutia. For many, it has been a surprise, it has been accepted, and her leadership has been transferred to him. And just the last poll that we had, he's 21 points up Maduro, with a pretty good chance to do that higher. So it is difficult, obviously. I think we have the most complicated weeks to come, but no one saw this coming 15 months ago. The international community plays a very important role, not only the United States, European Union, Latin America. Actually, we had achieved that traditional allies of Maduro, such as the government of Colombia and Brazil, in this case President Petro and President Lula, have expressed some concerns about the human rights situation in Venezuela and the lack of transparency of this election. And we will have a very intense weeks to come, but we might get a surprise during the next months, and hopefully we can start a transition in Venezuela towards democracy.
Thank you, David. Carlos, let's switch it to the stories of the migrants. You have been covering and documenting the journeys of so many Venezuelans across the region. Tell us some of the stories that have stayed with you. What are those stories of Venezuelans that have left their countries or have left everything behind just for you to still stay convinced that those stories need to be heard?
So, I mean, I've been covering professionally as a journalist Venezuela and the region for over 10 years now. Time flies. I think and just to give you some context, I really came into covering the social and political state of Venezuela, and including these stories that you speak of, by pure chance. I think before 2014, I was working in advertising, shooting TV commercials in Venezuela. I was based over there. And then in 2014, riots happen in Venezuela. I can't remember the month. You might know. February of 2014. And by then I had independently produced a couple of documentaries, one on the precarious state of prisons in Venezuela that led to the book we're going to talk about a little bit here in a minute, and just another one. It was a profile. And that kind of put my name out there as someone who was based in Venezuela, who was able to tell stories, you know, with a camera and a microphone and whatnot. So when 2014 happened, I just happened to be one of the very few producers who was able to, in Venezuela, who was able to get some of these stories out there. So ABC, Telemundo, Univision, AJ Plus, New York Post. I mean, I was making like stories. I was telling stories for all those networks. And that's when I thought, it's common sense. A microphone, a camera, access, which I had, and editing, and I could get these stories out. And I completely then left my advertising career behind. I've told so many stories, and I'm proud of every single one of them. As a journalist, I do have to walk a very thin line. If anybody here is in media, you know that as a journalist, you have to be objective, impartial, within reason. And I've walked this line between offering facts and statistics and numbers, but also what's the emotional connection over here. And when we talk about migration into the US, especially we talk about Venezuelans or any other nationality, it's about humanizing these folks, not just numbers, not just hundreds of thousands are coming over here, but like, let's look at these stories. Let's really empathize with them, because obviously they're leaving something behind that if they didn't have to, they probably wouldn't. So yes, I'll tell you this one story, and I think it'll be a good opportunity to show the first clip today from a documentary that I directed back in 2018, 2019. This clip, I think, shows in just 3 minutes the plight of the Venezuelan people, what it means to have to leave your country. Just to set up the bit over here, and this is one of my favorite stories that I've done. Willy Arteaga was once a political symbol of resistance in Venezuela. He was a violinist who would walk the streets of Venezuela being shot at with rubber bullets. He just played in the name of peace. He eventually moved to the U.S., escaped to the U.S., and ended up here in New York. I met with him by complete chance while I was walking in the subway. He was playing in the subway. And I said, Willie, I filmed you in 2017 while you were being shot at by rubber bullets and tear gas. What are you doing? He told me that he was waiting for his political asylum to come through, and then I followed him in his life for 3 months. At that time, and I guess this clip starts with him not having seen his family in 1 whole year since he had left the country, and because he saved enough money and sent it home, he was able to buy his parents a smartphone. So in this clip over here, you're gonna see how they speak for the first time in a whole year. Thank you. In a country where more than 80% of families live under the poverty line, partly because of rampant hyperinflation, saving money is an impossible task. Thanks to Willy's help, though, his parents were finally able to buy a smartphone, and they're going to surprise him with a video call. They haven't seen each other's faces in over a year.
Aló.
Aló.
Hola.
Hola.
Uy.
¿Y me oye, pelo lindo?
Estoy espelucado.
¿Te gusta?
Papi. Te agarro. Hacete cariño.
¿Cómo está vida?
Ay, estoy bien. Tocando.
Está llorando.
Yo te voy a comprar tus gotas, mami.
Estamos bien, estamos bien. Estamos bien, bien.
Los amo. Ay, porque quiero que tengan su casa. Yo estoy bien, yo estoy de maravilla. Tú no me estás viendo lo bello que estoy yo.
Te extrañamos mucho, viejito.
Pronto vamos a estar juntos, papi.
Sí, vamos a estar juntos en un apartamento allá, así como yo aquí. Tengo hasta peluche, me tienen peluche.
Sí, ya vimos. Ya vimos.
Los amo, los amo. Les mandé para mercado, compré en mercado, en la cuenta de mi mamá.
Mira, ¿sabes que no, nos llamas otra vez, oíste?
Ya, cortó.
Sí quisiera que estuvieran mejor, pues. Así como yo, ¿sabes? Pero no es culpa mía que ellos no estén mejor.
So you see that, I add a little bit of context because I narrated the film and I talk about numbers, but then when you see what it really means, I think everybody's experienced longing or missing somebody, but that's real. And you see a lot of emotions. Obviously, they're sad, but then at the end, you hear Willie saying, "It's not my fault that they're not doing okay." So some of the emotions that you feel when you leave forcefully is you feel a little bit of guilt, because there are people that were left behind and you're not there. So, again, this is something that you cannot just do with numbers. You need that emotional connection, and that I think has been my job as a journalist. Yeah.
Thank you. It's the story behind. We're more than numbers and a piece of paper. Appreciate it. David, from the policy perspective, before St. Hopkins, you used to work at the Organization of American States. You worked closely with so many presidents across the region, and you were, I would say, effortlessly or trying so hard all the time to promote innovative policy making towards refugees and the integration in the recipient countries. So what would be from you some measures that can be taken to better integrate from the international community these displaced people?
Yes, as you mentioned, Eric, I had the opportunity to work at the Organization of American States for 5 years as a special envoy of the Secretary General to address the Venezuela migration and refugee crisis when it was just starting. When I started on that job, we were only 1 million Venezuelan migrants and refugees, and as I said, now we're 8 million. I think there is a depth from the international community that Venezuelans have not been recognized as refugees. This is something that has happened to other populations, which I truly believe they deserve, such as Syrians or Ukrainians, Afghans as well, but has not happened with Venezuelans. So on that context, the policies that have been promoted is that each country has established their own mechanism to protect and integrate Venezuelan migrants and refugees. One of the most important is the one that Colombia started to implement during COVID. That is in Spanish, Estatuto Temporal de Protección, which is like a TPS in Colombia, but it is very innovative because it's for 10 years, not 18 months. It's for 10 years. So after 5 or 6 years, you can apply for being a Colombian resident and then get the citizenship. Something similar is implementing also in Peru, but Peru is for 2 years. Chile also did something very important, which is the visa de responsabilidad democrática, call it like democracy responsibility visa, that also looks for protect Venezuelans, migrants and refugees that get there. But it is probable now that approximately 3 million out of the 8 million Venezuelan migrants and refugees don't have any type of documentation, not visa, not resident, not TPS. So there are many ways that the governments that can promote policies to protect and attend and integrate Venezuelan migrants and refugees. Documentation, first response, which of course is healthcare, nutrition, shelter. Something that goes very under the radar on the Venezuelan migration and refugee crisis is mental health, which is very traumatic, as you saw in the video, when you are forced to flee your country, when you are far away from your family, when you get a route like the Darien Gap, where literally you see people that died in front of you. That's crucial to address. And also, I would say that more efforts needs to do in the region to protect women that are victims of human trafficking. Unfortunately, last year, for example, more than 90% of the Venezuelans migrants that were victims of human trafficking were women, and many of those women were teenagers, and a lot of them are suffering, especially in the Caribbean. Which, by the way, that illicit activity is, as the part of it, start in Venezuela with the impunity of the system, of the justice system, and the cooperation of some security forces. So I would say that those are the priorities right now, but we are working really hard that if the transition starts in Venezuela, which I know is against every odd, but it might start, we would love to have people stop fleeing our country and start seeing people going back to reunite with our families.
Thank you. So far, we have a clearer picture of what's happening in Venezuela. So far, we have a clear picture of what are the migration patterns and challenges. How about we take a switch and we bring some art to the table and humanizing the stories that you were mentioning, Carlos. And something that we have in here is that your project, it suddenly occurred to me, portrays precisely and combines photography and poetry to depict the Venezuelan crisis. How this project came about? And what message do you hope to come out of it? How did you put all of this together as a concept to humanize the stories behind?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll try to be brief over here. So the project or the book, it suddenly occurred to me. I guess it took me and a very kind group of people about 12 years to put this book together. And that's one of those attempts at not focusing on numbers and statistics, but just focusing on a story. So it suddenly occurred to me, ended up being a bit of a biography, an experimental biography of Venezuela, through the life of a woman, a very special woman, Yadira Silva, who I believe you both are familiar with her, who kind of channels what many millions of Venezuelans have gone through. Her story, even though it's quite intense and unique in many ways. She spent 8 years in some of the worst prisons in Venezuela when she was in her early 20s. Now she's close to, she's 59 now. I still talk to her almost every day. She wrote every day, and I'll tell you a little bit about this. You asked how this project began. Back in 2011, I made this 24-minute documentary on the precarious state of prisons in Venezuela. She happened to be one of the 3 ex-incarcerated people that I talked to talk about their experiences, and not only inside a prison, but also reinserting themselves in a society as difficult as Venezuelan society can be. And what caught my attention was she was an incredible writer. She's a self-taught poet. She won't call herself a poet, but I do call her one. And I would see her writings, her text, everything by hand. I said, Yadira, one day, we have to work together. I need to publish your work because it's very special. So in 2009, 2010, we started working, and I would take photographs of places that were very special to her as a child, and we started working with her texts. But I could spend hours doing this. I think I like showing videos. So I have a second video, very short, to just kind of put everything into context that had to do with the book and project.
It Suddenly Occurred to Me was a labor of love. The book explores a complicated political, social, and economic reality in Venezuela, and it does it through a dialogue between the texts of Yadira Silva, some of them written more than 30 years ago from prison, and my documentary photography work. I met Yadira back in 2010 in Caracas while working on a documentary on the precarious prison system in Venezuela. As a young woman, she spent 8 years in some of the worst prisons in the country because of theft, In the documentary, I featured her work as a human rights advocate for those incarcerated, but I didn't get to fully explore another fascinating side of her. She is a brilliant writer. Reflecting on her experiences, injustice, and even love saved her life, as she says, inside and outside of prison. So we decided to collaborate and work on a project that would feature her writing and my photographs. We spent over 4 years working together, but by 2014, after years of covering political turmoil and corruption in Venezuela, the project came to a halt.
Yo voy a decir nombres aquí, no digan que no se lo estoy diciendo, señoras y señores, pero vamos a llegar hasta todos ustedes. Llámese como se llame, tenga el apellido que tenga, no se vayan a equivocar. Miembros con mayor participación en Venezuela, voy con nombre. Carlos Beltran, no digan que no se lo estoy diciendo. Giovanna Medina.
After that, I continued to report on Venezuela, but the project was no longer a priority until 2018. I was lucky to reconnect with Yadira, who was then living in Colombia. She had left 9 manuscripts in an abandoned apartment in Caracas, but we found them. A small team was able to scan hundreds of pages. These were then transcribed, edited, selected, translated to English, and finally sequenced along with my photographs. By 2020, the book had been designed in New York by Faride Mereb, and the printing process would start in Caracas at the award-winning Ex Libris Press. But we had a pandemic. It would take 2 years for an edition of 200 books to be completed. Ultimately, I hope this book leaves you with the same message that encouraged me to begin its production many years ago. Like Yadira Silva, everyone is entitled to self-expression, regardless of the tools we use, the places we come from, and the mistakes we've made along the way.
So this project was an effort. Oh, thank you. Thank you. One of the things that I wish I could do more often is to have Yadira here with us. Yadira left, she was persecuted and left Venezuela by foot in 2017. She was working with the opposition. You are very familiar with her, you worked with her. And she went to Colombia, Mexico. Right now she's in Argentina. She still writes every day. She's still managing to survive every day, doing odd jobs, but I keep in touch with her. And I told her, we need to get your work out there. So the books, we just happen to have, there's I think 80 books left of the collection of 200. We only sell those books during talks like this, and that money goes to both Yadira and organizations aiding migrants and forced migrants and refugees in the US and abroad. So we're very proud of the work we've done, and hopefully you'll spend some time with the book today. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I believe that every time, every second, every minute that you spend reading, talking, or experiencing Yadira's humanity, it definitely touches you at a personal level. I recommend you to please check it out. David, you and I know, and for so long, we have, and you have, nonstop elevating and using your voice to call out what's happening in Venezuela, to advocate for human rights in the country, and to always bring the innovative perspective as a solution when it comes to policy making. But hearing the stories of Yadira, which you also know personally, how do you feel can we bring that emotional level when it comes to the migrants, refugees, displaced people that we usually and often forget that they are as humans as we are? What do you think of Yadira's stories or any other stories of any migrant on that matter could be and needs to be seen in places like this?
So powerful. I had the opportunity to work with Yadira a long time ago, and I remember that when we were doing social work, we went to a very beautiful place in Venezuela. Its name is Margarita, Isla Margarita, Margarita Island, and we were there. We went there to. In that moment, we were creating a political party.
And I'm sorry to interrupt because people might not know. She was working and for the opposition party.
Yes.
And she was focusing, I believe, in the human rights within prisons, right? Inside of
Exactly,
prisons, right?
exactly.
So that's why she was.
And when we went there, and we were working, even though it's the worst place to go to work, but we had, I remember, a weekend, and we had a Sunday, and we went to a beautiful beach, and she told me, "Wow, this is the first time that I see the Caribbean Sea for ages," and she was someone very inspiring for anyone doing social and political work in Venezuela. And I think that question that you're asking, Eric, is vital. You can, and I have said it, you can say a lot of numbers, stats, data, but we cannot forget that we are talking about people, even children, teenagers, elderly. To be honest, there were moments where I was at the OES that I did more than 1,200 interviews to Venezuelan migrants and refugees from Canada to Argentina. One of our mandate was to raise awareness of what was the root of cause for people fleeing Venezuela. And there were moments that I had to stop because the suffering, it's like, there is a story of Rosiris, for example, that there was one of the most striking, that she fled Venezuela from the West Coast, Falcon State, in a fish boat to Aruba. And the fish boat sank at midnight, and she was pregnant, and 6 months pregnant. And she started swimming. And she told me the only person that I had was God in that moment, if I could get it to the island. And I couldn't believe when I was interviewing her and doing what we call the round table with migrants, that she was not only alive, that she was working in Aruba and she had her baby. But she was in the middle of the sea. So there are so many stories. There's so much suffering, and cultural activities are important. There are now different initiatives. For example, there is a movie, its name is Simón, that has been displayed in different cities across the world, where people can understand more the human rights violations in Venezuela through a story, by the way, of two young men that one of those migrated, fled the country. I'm not doing a spoiler, but it is a powerful movie. There is also a very powerful initiative from an NGO. Its name is Voces de la Memoria, that through virtual reality, you go to this place that I said, El Helicoide, the biggest torture center in Latin America, and for 15 minutes, through virtual reality, you feel what is to be in El Helicoide. You hear the tortures. You feel what is to be completely in darkness. I hope that when democracy, we have a museum for migrants like the one you see here in Ellis Island, because probably the most dramatic aspect of this brutal dictatorship have been the exodus of 25% of the population, the separation of the family, because many of other things, it's hard, but you can recover. It's hard to recover a house, but maybe if you work very hard, you can recover, among other things. But the time with your family, it's brutal. I mean, we're having more than 1 million people in Venezuela, 65 years old and older, that are alone because their children and grandchildren have fled. And also you're having a bit more than 1 million babies or under menores de edad, under 18 years old in Venezuela that have been left under a custody different from their parents because of the migration. So these have so many difficult phases, but at the same time, we have to see it as an opportunity, because if we keep it on this, you never, step up. And even though it is hard, and I think Venezuelan migrants are providing a unique opportunity, especially to the region. The vast majority of those Venezuelans want to work, want to study, want to be entrepreneurs, and they are already impacting positively on their economies of those countries. So we have also to share the good stories. The stories that are inspiring, and how so many Venezuelans coming to a country like the US, which is a different language from us, many have been able to reinvent themselves, learn English. They started probably, as I have known many, doing Uber 14 hours a day or being as a bartender or whatever, and now they are the manager of that restaurant when they started as a bartender, or they're having their own company. Those are truly inspiring stories, because we're going to need the migrants in the future to rebuild Venezuela. And look at how criminal is this regime. Venezuelan migrants and refugees have been banned to vote on this election. Almost 5 million people that could vote this July 28th, we have been banned, which is an atrocity that already the Inter-American Human Rights Commission have expressed its concern. You saw the elections recently in Mexico. Mexicans overseas were able to vote. Dominican Republic had an election recently. Dominicans, especially here in New York, were able to vote. We, Venezuelans, in Colombia, in Ecuador, or in Peru, or wherever you can imagine, we cannot vote. And this is something that I want to emphasize. What we're living in Venezuela goes beyond ideology. It goes beyond ideology. This is not an ideological problem. We are dealing here with a narco state, and take this responsibility of these words that I'm saying. So this goes beyond ideology, because they used to say things that were supposed to be like center-left or whatever, and we're in the Pride Month, and Venezuela is one of the few countries that LGBTIQ plus community is banned to be married, for example. Or Venezuela is having the 5th largest deforestation right now in the world, in the southeast of the country, in Bolivar state, which is one of the lungs, by the way, of the world, or is one of the top 5 countries that is venting more gas per oil barrel produced. So there's no any compromise with those ideas. And this is very important to have in mind, or to have in present, and that is why we have done a huge effort, especially in Washington, D.C., to keep the Venezuelan cause bipartisan in this country.
And unfortunately, the list goes on when it comes to share open wounds as Venezuelans. As David mentioned, we share in here not only the fact that we are banned to vote, but so many people share to be exiled. And I guess that goes to my next question to you, Carlos, because we believe that exile or persecution only is to those participating in politics, to those protesting, or to those that have certain role of leadership. When it comes to journalists, Venezuela as well have persecuted journalists. Do you consider yourself an exilee, or how do you present yourself in this new arena when you have different waves of migration coming in here, even by foot nowadays?
I'm surprised I am not formally exiled from Venezuela. So as you saw, 2014, the Vice President of Congress called me out on national television. I left. I was able to escape little avioneta, to Aruba. Then I came back because I had friends who told me you're not blacklisted or whatnot. In 2016, I was working with ABC News on a story on the precarious state of government-run hospitals in Venezuela. And then we got detained by the national police, and I spent 5 nights in political prison. I'm still allowed to go back to Venezuela, and I went back to 7 very stubbornly. I'm married now. I can't be doing all those things anymore. I went back in 2017 to cover the protests, I believe, for NBC, and that was the last time I went to Venezuela, 2017. Since then, it's not that I haven't covered what's happening there, but I've been doing it from here, from the U.S. Part of that was the clip from the documentary that I did in 2018 to 2019. So I don't consider myself an exile. There are several reasons why I haven't gone back to Venezuela. One of them is we don't have a consulate. Venezuela doesn't have a consulate here in the U.S., so to renew my Venezuelan passport is impossible. And it's so fun because I'm sure that there are people here in the audience that have gone through the odyssey that it is to renew a Venezuelan passport so that you can go there. I'm also Colombian, but believe it or not, if I go to Venezuela, even as a Colombian who was born in Venezuela, the government won't let me leave the country. And I have a life over here. So it's just so convoluted. So no, as a journalist, I've been trying to focus on these stories. Right now, I focus on solely on migration and immigration stories. I work for CBS News, and now I have this urge and responsibility, not only as a Venezuelan, but as a migrant myself, to do this, present the facts, present the numbers, but also humanize these stories.
Talking about the facts and getting back to the book, one thing you mentioned in there is that it took some time to recover Yadira's manuscripts. And if anyone knows that have shared the story of being an exile, you have a limited time to put together your whole life and then being able to bring it with you to whatever or whichever destiny you have put in mind. So tell us a little bit more on how was that process of finding Yadira's manuscripts? How was to put together a set of a team together back home in Venezuela, but then being able to create the book as a journalist yourself, like keeping a real job and at the same time doing your passionate work for Venezuela through Yadira's?
Yeah, and thank you for bringing the conversation back to the book. The book was, again, like I said in the video, a passion project, and incredibly painstaking work to do that, because it was nights and weekends, because I did have a full-time job. I was working then at NBC as well. So Yadira had left the country already, and like I said in the video, so we had someone go into her apartment and a couple of other places and find these manuscripts. And it took us a long time. We had to deal with a pandemic. We had to deal with shortages in Venezuela. We wanted to print the book in Venezuela, and we were able to do so, but it just took us forever. I do have to say, I don't think he's here today, but we're here today because of two very special people. I know Anelia and Kevin Jackson are two like proponents and advocates for Venezuelan art, and they're the ones who funded the production of the book. We just had to wait a lot for it to happen. So I'm not even sure if I answered your question, but it was just extremely painstaking. And I can't do justice to the book because Yadira's not here today to read it. However, if you allow me, she did something very special, and she is still writing, like I said, and she's in Argentina, and she took a few minutes last week to read her latest, most recent text, reflecting on migration and leaving your home behind. She sent it to me, I subtitled it, and if we can run that quick clip, please. Thank you.
Migrar no es solo cambiar de lugar, es también cambiar de vida. Es dejar atrás lo conocido por lo desconocido. Es despedirse sin saber cuándo volveremos a encontrarnos. Hay momentos en que las lágrimas brotan y el corazón se estremece, pero en medio de todo también he encontrado una fortaleza interior que me impulsa a seguir adelante. Solo Dios sabe lo que sentimos, muchos lejos de casa. Cada paso que damos hacia lo desconocido nos confronta con nuestra propia fortaleza y vulnerabilidades. Nos encontramos con una mezcla de emociones, el entusiasmo por las oportunidades que nos espera, la tristeza y la esperanza de construir un mundo mejor. En medio de todo esto hay un hilo constante que nos sostiene: el amor por nuestra familia y seres queridos que dejamos atrás, el amor por nuestra cultura y raíces, y el amor por el camino que seguimos construyendo. Nunca he permitido que el ruido del mundo silencie la música de mi alma. Sigo avanzando. Aprendí que a través de los ríos, playas, volcanes, montañas e increíbles paisajes de los países donde me ha tocado vivir, que desafían el tiempo, podemos enfrentar cualquier obstáculo. Determinación y coraje. Gracias a todo lo que he vivido, descubrí que la fuerza no solo reside en los músculos, sino en el espíritu resiliente de quienes enfrentan desafíos. Muchísimas gracias.
It's her way with words, and after going through so much, and like when you go, and I do encourage you folks, if you have a minute, just to stop by and just leaf through one of the copies that we have of the book. Just any page you open, you're gonna see a reflection, just a couple of lines, and it'll touch you. She's gone through a lot in her life, and that book is both her story and the story of millions of Venezuelans. And as you see, she's just a fantastic human being. Yeah.
Yeah, Yadira's gift. At a personal level, I have to share that, as David was saying, and we've been talking about, that this is beyond a paper, a piece of paper, a number, and it's a humanity behind. Yadira helped me a lot while my brother passed away on my birthday this year, just 3 months ago. and having her support and finding the words that weren't able to come out of my mouth. And I usually brag about being able to put together some sort of sentences. But that day and through that period and through this grievance, Yadira have been a special support. And I find fascination on the arts and the culture and ways to connect through not only suffering, but through the hope of creating and believing in a better future and hoping on what can be done for good out of all this chaos that we're facing. And David, you were a mayor, you have spoken with so many presidents, you have had the opportunity to work at different levels of government. How do you see a really compelling policy that brings arts and culture to bridge perhaps that gap that we have within the recipient communities, that a lot of the sudden they think that they are taking newborn babies and forgetting that we come with a lot of baggage, a lot of wounds, but a lot of culture to add up to the table?
Yes, you reminded me of my years as a mayor, and remember that the cultural activities were always for us a priority for our community. And I was a mayor in a town in Venezuela, its name is El Atillo, that had like everyone, almost a whole country, but in El Atillo, there's an Italian community and Portuguese community. And for example, we were able to promote their culture, their food, their history, and in a place smaller than this, but has some similarities. We have exhibitions, musicals, and I think what I said it earlier. I mean, it is very hard, the stories of migrants. I mean, on my case, from one day to another, as a political activist and as a mayor, I was illegally removed from office, banned from the public administration, issued an arrest warrant. I had just a few minutes to say goodbye to my loved ones. I went in hiding for 35 days. And talking about arts, I have to disguise as a priest, and went through a route of more than 1,000 kilometers through 35 checkpoints, so they couldn't recognize me until I fled Venezuela in September 2017, and since then I have not been able to go back. But I'm sorry to say my own story, because I have also learned that we can provide so much to the recipient communities. And the best ambassadors also to, for example, tackle xenophobia are the migrants. And sometimes we see things in the news and people tend to generalize that all Venezuelans are criminals, or all Venezuelans are this and that. And I said it, the vast majority want to study, want to work, want to entrepreneur. I think living in a globalized world with the booming of the technology and social media, which sometimes is not that good, but in other parts is great. You can learn so much from the culture of those. And this is a country, in the U.S., for example, that has been an example worldwide, how has been built because of many migrants that came from different parts of the world. And I think art art is one of the best ways to integrate, because it's not enough only to get to the country and get your documentation. You need that truly integration, because if that doesn't happen, you start to create like little ghettos on those cities, and people are not integrated and not knowing each other. And I think we have an opportunity now with so many Venezuelans that have come here forced to flee. No one has left Venezuela because we want, because we have been forced to flee, because our life has been in danger for different reasons.
Yeah, networks of capitals we all definitely need in order to promote social integration of these newcomers. As I believe we still have some more time to open the floor to the audience for a few questions. If you feel like it, please raise your hand and we'll start from here. We're going to take 3 questions and then, or how do you feel like? answering in between, or?
Yeah, we can probably do that. Yeah, and then we want to leave some time so folks can take just a few minutes to check out the book out there.
Over here, yeah. I think it was first, yeah. And then over there.
So you said your names were what again?
Eric Rosso, sorry, David Smolansky, and Carlos Beltran.
That was an easy question. Thank you. Next.
Have y'all known each other since college, or are y'all colleagues, or do y'all have a mutual relationship with each other? Because
I
I feel like y'all are pretty close based on how y'all were talking about your story.
yeah.
We have, I believe the Venezuelans, we share a lot of friends in common. David and I co-founded a political party together, but life had taken us in different ways. And Carlos and I have shared stories sometimes, but we reconnected to be here today.
Yeah, I met David like a year ago, maybe, but I always joke and say that Venezuelans are zero degrees of separation from each other. Like many of us in this room would probably have many friends. Thank you. Yeah.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Thank you. You can repeat the question.
Yeah. I'm listening, yeah. Yeah.
Number two, I was just wondering how is it Venezuelans feel they're being welcomed in New York?
Our Venezuelans feel like they're
Okay, well, regarding the first question,
Can you repeat it?
yeah, the first question is that Venezuela is a narco state. Are we having free and fair elections? No, we're not having free and fair elections for different reasons. One of them is almost 5 million people, migrants, 5 million Venezuelan migrants, as I said, are banned to vote. The leader of the opposition, who won the primary last year, has been banned to run. International observation apparently will not be allowed, at least the European Union. Maybe the Carter Center from the U.S. will go. And also the persecution. 20 people already that are part of the campaign team are either illegally detained or under a refugee status in an embassy in Venezuela. So it is not, but we are seeing July 28th not also as an opportunity to have people voting, because there is a 9 out of 10 Venezuelans want Maduro out. But people also are afraid to go to the streets and protest because of the repression, all of that we have gone through. So July 28th is a huge opportunity to show, not only to us, but worldwide, that the vast majority want Maduro out, but also it's an opportunity to mobilize. So that could be even more powerful on not having the conditions for free and fair elections. On the New York side, I think Eric and Carlos could talk better than me on this. I can tell you about Washington, D.C. Tens of thousands of Venezuelans have arrived in Washington, D.C. The vast majority have been transported from Texas, some also from Arizona by buses, and they are left in Union Station, which is the train station in Washington, D.C. When that started really, really hard 2 years ago, many humanitarian organizations did an outstanding job, and social civil society organization addressing those migrants, providing food, healthcare, shelter. Now there has been very interesting articles on that is getting more and more famous, that so many Venezuelans have become the best deliveries in Washington, D.C., because with the small motorcycles that are very famous in Venezuela, that I didn't know that you didn't, at least in D.C., you don't need a driving license to have that small bike that is a bit faster than a bicycle. Now you're seeing them with Uber Eats, with DoorDash, but and on that side has been good. I think it's moving a little bit the economy of DC. But on the other hand, the shelters and some hotels that have been served as shelters are overcrowded. And I'm a bit concerned, as I said earlier, about human trafficking. So many people put the efforts or put their mind on criminal activities and so on, which is Of course, you have to be aware, and we cannot generalize, but there are Venezuelan migrants, especially women, that are being victims in this country, and I'm talking on DC, on human trafficking, on sex slavery, and things like that. I think it could be addressed more fiercely from the local authorities.
Okay. Hey. Oh, you just have to turn it off and on. Carlos, I was wondering if you could tell us more about when you found those manuscripts. What, like, the apartment had stayed abandoned? How hard was it to get back in there? What kind of condition were they in? It just seems like a crazy moment.
Yes, thank you. So I met Yadira back in 2010 or so when I was working on the documentary. And in that documentary, which, by the way, it's public and free, you can see it, she does read some of her work. So I knew that she had these notebooks at her place, right? But then, like I said on the video, in 2014, we stopped and I left the country, and then we reconnected back in 2018, and I asked her, did you take the notebooks with you? She was back then in Mexico. And she said, no, they're in my apartment, they're there. And she told me the key to that apartment was in a little bodega, like a few miles away from her apartment. So I had to connect with a friend of mine to go to the bodega, get the key, find somebody, the super at the building, to go to her apartment, find the books, put them all in a bag, and then eventually got them scanned. And then, yeah, some of them were in very poor condition, but we were able to just kind of salvage many of them. That was just a mere fraction of the work that she's done in her life. Many. Like, you can imagine that she's probably had hundreds of books. We found 9 books, and they were completely filled. And those are the ones that we chronologically put together, and eventually you'll find in the book. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nadine Soto. I'm a Venezuelan living in New York. Thank you so much for your excellent presentation. I'm a proud owner of Carlos's book. It's truly a beautiful work of art. One of the things that struck me when I came to New York a year ago was, of course, the sheer number of Venezuelans, having a rough time, having recently arrived in precarious conditions in New York, but also just the sheer diversity of our community here. A lot of us, some have been more established for the past few years, many of us, with legal status, exercising our profession. What advice or call to action would you have to those of us who can and want to support our fellow countrymen and women, but also maybe people in the audience who might be sensitized to our situation, and those of us who are having a harder time? What can we do to support these people? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think, Eric, you'd be the perfect person to answer that.
I actually would say for you to save some time and talk while the book is over there, because among the audience, there are frontliners that have been involved in the response of the Robert, Leonardo, and some others that I would rather give the platform to them. And actually, I would believe that we would need to organize a second forum of these to bring the frontliners that have been responding to the reception of Venezuelans, and also working at the different levels. What we are doing is working at the development side that has to do with those that already have papers, those that already have a dream, and how can we create a plan among the people that we know to help them to get to that next level. So within responses, and when it comes to humanitarian responses, we have different levels, and the frontliners, they are within the audience, and I believe they should be the ones talking to what can you do right now.
I think.
Yeah, hello, good evening. Muy buenas tardes. I'm Venezuelan American, so I'll be speaking in both languages. Soy venezolana estadounidense y hablaré en ambos idiomas. David, you said something so powerful. David, dijiste algo muy poderoso. Democracy was used to destroy democracy. Se usó la democracia como una herramienta para destruir la democracia. So my question is, entonces mi pregunta es, what do we need to reinstate democracy? ¿Qué vamos a necesitar para otra vez tener democracia en Venezuela? And the reason I asked that question, la razón por la cual pregunto eso, is because we haven't really had a good strategy or implemented an action plan to do so. Y lo pregunto porque no hemos tenido un plan estratégico para implementar una solución.
Indeed, Democracy was indeed, thank you for your question, and yeah, democracy was used to destroy democracy in our country. I think during the last 15 months, and this will be very Venezuelan thing, very domestic, but during the last 15 months, some people and some analysts have said that the regime has committed many mistakes. I would say that things have done way better than in maybe other moments in the past. And we have learned, and some policies have been improved. 15 months ago, Venezuelans were hopeless. You just imagine where were you February or March of 2023. Sure that you were not thinking that this is possible, a change or something. And I'm not saying that it will happen, or I'm not saying that it's something that will be easy. But we're seeing a hope right now, or feeling a hope right now that it was absent 15 months ago. And I'm seeing something that I haven't seen in my political career that I started when I was a student, which is a very weird combination of hope with realism. People are hopeful, but at the same time know very well what we're facing. People are going to vote July 28th knowing that we can be robbed, that it could be a fraud, that the regime could decide and go after Edmundo Gonzalez as a candidate, was after Maria Corina Machado as a Democratic leader of the opposition. But still, people are participating, and maybe, are the, how you say that in English, the scars that a regime like we have faced provides you that you are better prepared. It won't be easy to have that transition, and I think we cannot I think we cannot plan a country that it used to be. Venezuela shouldn't be anymore the country that has been during these 25 years, but it cannot also think that it will be the country that was on the second half of the 20th century. It's just basically a new nation that will start from the scratch. It will be challenging, but I think it will be the most beautiful job in any part of the world, because this is a country with with resources and with so many opportunities that it has to be start from the scratch on education, on healthcare, on infrastructure, on energy, on security, but especially on democratic values. For me, it's so important to guarantee democracy in Venezuela, to have independent public branches, to have access to justice, to tackle impunity, to tackle corruption. Corruption in Venezuela is insane. I mean, the last guy who was detained by the regime, who was a very important from regime, he robbed $21 billion, $21 billion. I mean, he could have built 21 Yankee stadiums. That's what he robbed, 21 Yankee stadiums, And so you need to tackle that. So those are the things that need to be a priority, and also to respect and guarantee human rights. If we are able to address those topics, work on that, and provide also security, because Venezuelans have been victims for crime. Who are Venezuelans here? Please raise a hand just quickly. Okay, who have been victims of crime in Venezuela when you used to live there, or if you know someone who have been victims of crime in Venezuela, any crime from, you raise your hand? So yeah, I was kidnapped, for example. So it's something that needs to be changed, and if that happens, also it will be more trust to invest, to get back the private sector. So that's how you start rebuilding a nation. As I said, it won't be easy, but I think it's very, dreaming to only think what we can do. But we need to start first, and it's doing our best on July 28th and start the transition.
We have chance only for one very short last one.
Hola.
It's about the election itself. And Machado was disqualified. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Machado was disqualified, and this particular candidate, I'm sorry, the name.
Edmundo Gonzalez.
And he was allowed to run. And I'm just kind of wondering why, and why now? Is it okay? Oh, thank you. Is it the 6 months that, there was a relaxation of sanctions for 6 months, based on the fact that, okay, dependent on the fact that Venezuela would have free and open elections. And, you know, the last one, it didn't quite work, and Machado was kicked out, but now there's an open election. Is this for sanctions relief? Is this real? Is this going to be monitored? How will it be monitored? That was just a simple question.
Very quick. Hopefully we will have the Carter Center in Venezuela, at least. We are building probably the biggest civic organization for any elections in Venezuela, what we call the 600K plan. So we're going to have 600,000 Venezuelans organized that day to be poll watchers, mobilizers, and volunteers to protect our vote. And maybe the registration of Mundo González Urrutia was a combination of a miscalculation from the regime, but at the same time, silent diplomacy that many of us have made, that some pressure coming from especially countries like Brazil or Colombia and the US, among others, were put on the regime that González Urrutia have to be allowed to run. So we'll see.
Again, thank you, and I'm sorry we really have to close on time. You know, this is not Venezuelan time, it's American time. So please, we will be meeting with you outside and
Outside
at the entrance where the book is, so you can check the book, you can ask more questions, and we don't want to leave without saying thank you to Marcia and the Center for Brooklyn History for hosting us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this
We
wonderful
can take a picture with you
conversation.
together.
And a selfie.
There we go. Thank
And continue
And
the
thanks to
conversation out in the front there, and please explore the book, which is really a work of art, and also, as Carlos said, a passion project, very intense. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.